The QSys Designer lets you monitor your system and track any potential issues in a variety of ways. You have constant access to the statuses of all your inventory items through the UCI. You can check the event log at any time to see any notable activity in your system, but what you might not have known is that it can also contact you. Let's take a look at a simple component with a lot of potential, the emailer. Open up your schematic library in the right side pane. Look under Control Components and drag the emailer component into your schematic. Double-click it to open its control panel. Now I'm going to run this design to the core so that I can test it out. Now this looks like any email you probably already used. First you type in the email address of your recipient and separate multiple recipients with a semicolon, comma, or space. Give your email a relevant subject and fill in the message section. You can send the email by clicking the Send button at the top, and then the status block will let you know if the email was successful, or if not, why it was unsuccessful. The bottom half of the control panel is the Configure pane, which you must set to match your outgoing email settings. Type your email in the From field. If the recipient of your email hits Reply, it will be sent to whatever address you put here. If your outgoing mail is password protected, you can input that password here, and you must also input the IP address of your outgoing SMTP mail server. However, you shouldn't use a server name unless the core is configured to use DHCP, and the DHCP server provides a name server address. If you need to change the port of this server from the default of 25, simply add a colon at the end of the address and input your port. If your mail service requires SSL, enable this button here. That's everything there is to the emailer component. It doesn't even have any editable properties besides its position and color. Now, it'll only work when you're running on a core, and while you could use it to manually email someone, its real power is in being able to wire it to send out alert emails automatically. Let's take a fairly typical example. You want to be notified of a fault in an inventory item. If a core or an amplifier status drops beneath OK, you want to know about it. So let's take a look at a few ways you could accomplish this. Let me disconnect from the core, and I'll look at my inventory. I have a core and an amplifier, and I'm going to pull both of their status components into my schematic. For each of them, I'll go to the right side pane, look at the Control Pins window, and activate the Status Control Pin. Now, if you have more than one inventory item that you want to monitor, you may not want to set up a different emailer for every single one. Instead, let's go to the schematic library again, under Control Components, and bring in a status combiner into the schematic. You can wire the control pins of any inventory item's status to the status combiner, and it will compile them together to let you know if there's a problem with any of them. Now, if anything goes wrong, this fault LED will light up. Well, I want that LED to trigger the emailer. So let's go to the Control Pins window of the status combiner and activate the fault control pin. Next, we have to create a trigger. So let's pull in a custom controls component, and we'll use it to create one momentary button. That means that the moment that this button is activated, it will send one impulse to whatever it's connected to. Wire the fault control pin to the momentary button. Now, when there's any fault in the system, this button will trigger. Let's go to our emailer component and open up some of its control pins. We want to be able to control the send button, and we also want to edit the message that it sends. We'll wire the trigger from the momentary button to the send button, but before it gets there, I actually want to bring in a control delay, which simply adds a bit of time between when this button is triggered and when it actually fires. You can adjust it anywhere between 0 and 10 seconds, and the reason I'm doing this is because I want to make sure there's enough time for the system to compile a log event of the failure, because that's what we'll use for the message of the email. Pull in the event log component from the schematic library and activate its last entry control pin. Wire this to the emailer message control pin, and it will use the last created log for the body of your email. If you're unfamiliar with the event log, refresh yourself with what it does by watching our administrator tutorial. So, let's review this entire chain. Your inventory items constantly send their status to a status combiner. If any of them are at a fault, the fault LED will send a signal to this momentary button, which, after a 5-second delay, triggers an email to be sent. The email consists of the last log entry of your event log, which should be the fault in your inventory, and it is sent to whoever you have established here in its control panel. Let's see this in action. Now, the amplifier I added earlier doesn't actually exist. So when I run this to the core, it's going to report a fault for the status of that amplifier. Then, After 5 seconds, we'll see the emailer start to send its message, and here in my inbox, I'll find the error log. It's just that simple. Now, as I said, this is just one way to do it. If you're familiar with Lua scripting, you could customize this process by using the control script component. In this design, we've taken the information not only from a fault warning, but also from a compromised warning and an OK status indicator, and fed them into a control script. Now in the code, we can dictate what happens in each of these circumstances. We've also built our own customized messages, which are then fed to the message field of the emailer rather than using the last event log. Now feel free to download this project file from qsctraining.com if you want to get a closer look at how we scripted this to work. Here's another example in which the user could customize the recipients of the email from a UCI. Rather than inputting all the names in one group text field, each recipient receives their own email. In this scenario, a speaker fault triggers a button, which launches a send command to every emailer, which receive their recipient name from the text field of the UCI. This project file is also available to download. Hopefully, this gives you an idea for the possibilities of using the emailer component and how to keep you or your user connected to the urgent events in the system. So, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.